The War Academy on Kepler Prime had never been quieter. In the vast amphitheater where thousands of alien cadets usually engaged in heated tactical debates, only the soft hum of environmental systems broke the silence. Today was different. Today, they would meet their new instructors. Commander Zixtal of the Arcturian Empire adjusted his crystalline uniform with 6 of his 8 arms, his compound eyes scanning the empty stage below. As the Academy's chief tactical officer, he had seen every form of warfare the galaxy had to offer. The Arcturians had conquered 47 star systems through superior strategy and overwhelming technological advantage. The insectoid hive collective had perfected swarm tactics that could overwhelm any defense. The energy-based luminari could strike from dimensions most species couldn't even perceive. But Earth? Earth was a mystery wrapped in contradiction. "Tell me again why we're doing this," muttered Lieutenant Kriva, her scaled reptilian features twisted in skepticism. As a draconian, she came from a warrior culture that had been fighting for 10,000 years. These humans have been spacefaring for what, barely 2 centuries? What could they possibly teach us about combat? Zixtal's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The Galactic Council's directive was very specific. After the siege of Vega Colony, human military effectiveness has been noted. Noted? Kriva's forked tongue flicked out in what passed for a laugh among her species. They got lucky. One battle doesn't make them combat experts. But Zixtal remembered the reports. Vega Colony had been considered undefendable, a small, mining outpost with minimal defenses, facing a full Rikstar invasion force. The Rikstar were notorious for their ruthless efficiency, mechanical precision, and complete inability to feel fear or pain. When they set their chrome-plated ships toward Vega, every military analyst in the galaxy had written off the colony as lost. The humans had other ideas. A soft chime echoed through the amphitheater, and 3 figures walked onto the stage. Zixtal felt his 4 hearts skip a beat. These couldn't be the legendary human warriors. They looked so ordinary. The first was a woman with graying hair tied back in a simple ponytail, wearing what appeared to be faded green clothing with strange markings. She moved with a subtle limp, favoring her left leg, and carried herself with the sort of casual confidence that came from having nothing left to prove. The second was a tall, dark-skinned man, whose right arm had been replaced with a mechanical prosthetic. Unlike the sleek, seamless cybernetics most species preferred, his replacement was clearly artificial, all exposed servos and utilitarian design. He wore the same green uniform with additional colorful rectangles on his chest. The third was the youngest, a pale woman with bright red hair and striking green eyes. Unlike her companions, she bore no visible battle scars, but something in her gaze made even the veteran aliens shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Good morning," said the older woman, her voice carrying easily through the amphitheater without amplification. "I'm Colonel Sarah Martinez, formerly of the United States Marine Corps. These are Major James Washington, Army Rangers, and Captain Riley O'Connor, Special Forces." Zixtal leaned forward. These 3 were supposedly the humans who had broken the Rikstar siege. They looked like they should be in a medical facility, not a war college. "I know what you're thinking," Martinez continued, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "We don't look like much, do we? I'm 58 years old. I've got shrapnel in my spine from a mortar round in Afghanistan, and my knees sound like grinding gears when I stand up. Major Washington there lost his arm to an IED in Syria, spent 2 years learning to tie his boots again. Captain O'Connor is the baby of the group at 32, but she's seen more combat zones than most of you have seen star systems." The aliens exchanged glances. This wasn't how warriors typically introduced themselves. Where were the boasts of conquest? The recitation of victories? The display of technological superiority? "Before we begin," Washington said, his prosthetic hand whirring softly as he gestured, "we need to understand something about human warfare. It's not pretty, it's not clean, and it's definitely not fair." O'Connor stepped forward, her green eyes scanning the audience. "Your species fight wars the way you think war should be fought. Honor codes, rules of engagement, technological superiority, strategic objectives. We fight wars to win. Martinez finished. And we fight them with whatever we have, wherever we are, for as long as it takes. Suddenly the lights dimmed, and a holographic display materialized above the stage. It showed Vega Colony from space, a small cluster of domed habitats clinging to an asteroid, surrounded by the geometric precision of mining equipment. Vega Colony, Martinez said. Population, 43,000. Defenses, 3 orbital platforms with light plasma cannons, a squadron of outdated fighters, and a planetary shield that could maybe stop a determined asteroid. The hologram shifted, showing an approaching fleet. Sleek, angular ships that seemed to absorb light, moving in perfect formation. The Rikstar 7th Fleet, Washington continued. 50 capital ships, 300 support vessels, and approximately 1 million synthetic soldiers programmed for complete victory or total destruction. In the audience, Zixtal's compound eyes narrowed. He had studied this battle extensively. The mathematics were simple. The Rikstar possessed overwhelming superiority in every measurable category. The colony's official military force consisted of 200 colonial Marines, O'Connor said. Good soldiers, but hopelessly outnumbered. So what changed the equation? Martinez asked the audience. Anyone want to guess? Lieutenant Kriva couldn't help herself. Superior human technology? Martinez laughed, not mockingly but with genuine amusement. Our ships were 80 years old, plasma cannons held together with spare parts and determination. Brilliant tactical genius, suggested a luminary cadet, its energy form flickering with curiosity. The local commander was a decent officer, Washington replied, but he wasn't Napoleon. Then what? Zixtal found himself asking, his curiosity overcoming his skepticism. The 3 humans exchanged a look, the kind of wordless communication that comes from shared experience in places where communication meant survival. Veterans, Martinez said simply. The hologram changed, showing the inside of a crowded transport ship. Humans of all ages, some missing limbs, others bearing visible scars, all wearing civilian clothes but carrying themselves with unmistakable military bearing. When news of the Rikstar fleet reached Earth, O'Connor explained, something happened that your military analysts didn't account for. Old soldiers started buying tickets to Vega Colony. They came from everywhere, Washington continued. Retired, Marines who'd fought in the Martian uprising, Army veterans from the Titan mining wars, Navy personnel who'd served on deep space patrols, Special Forces operators who'd been fighting in places most people couldn't pronounce. They weren't recalled to duty, Martinez emphasized. They weren't ordered to fight, they just showed up. Zixtal felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. How many? 15,000 veterans arrived in the 2 weeks before the Rikstar fleet reached Vega, O'Connor said. Ages 17 to 93. Some came in wheelchairs. Some came with oxygen tanks. All came ready to fight. The hologram showed crowded spaceports, ships of every description converging on a single point. Old freighters, luxury yachts converted for passenger transport. Even a few museum pieces that had been pulled out of mothballs for one last flight. Your military databases, Martinez said, classify this as irrational human behavior driven by primitive pack-bonding instincts. They're not wrong, Washington admitted. It was completely irrational. These weren't active soldiers. Most were decades past their prime, many had families, careers, entire lives to lose. So why did they come? Asked a young hive drone, its translator struggling with the concept. Riley. O'Connor's expression hardened, and for a moment, the aliens in the audience glimpsed something that made their various survival instincts trigger warning signals. Because nobody fights alone, she said quietly. Not on our watch. The statement hung in the air like a challenge. In the silence that followed, the holographic display shifted to show the surface of Vega Colony's main asteroid. What had been an orderly mining operation was now a chaotic hive of activity. Defensive positions were being carved out of solid rock. Supply lines were being established. Weapons were being distributed. The Rikstar arrived expecting to face 200 colonial Marines. Martinez said. Instead, they found 15,000 humans who had collectively fought in every major conflict of the past 60 years. But surely, Zixtal protested, experience couldn't overcome such technological and numerical disadvantage. The three humans smiled, the same predatory expression that had made humanity's reputation spread across the galaxy in whispered conversations. Commander, Martinez said, you're about to learn something about human warfare that no Academy textbook will teach you. The lights dimmed further, and the holographic display expanded to fill the entire amphitheater. The audience found themselves, seemingly floating in space above Vega Colony, watching as the Rixtar fleet took position for what should have been a routine orbital bombardment. Lesson 1, Washington said, his voice echoing in the darkened space. When humans fight, we don't fight for victory. We fight for each other. Lesson 2, O'Connor added. We've been fighting wars since before we discovered fire. We're very, very good at it. And Lesson 3, Martinez concluded, as the first Rixtar ships began their descent toward the colony. Never, ever underestimate what desperate humans can accomplish when they have nothing left to lose. The holographic Rixtar fleet began its attack, expecting to face a demoralized, overwhelmed defense. What they found instead would reshape galactic understanding of human warfare forever. But that story would have to wait. As the simulation paused, at the moment of first contact, Martinez looked out at the audience of alien cadets. Class dismissed for today, she said. Tomorrow we'll show you what happened when 15,000 human veterans decided that Vega Colony was worth dying for. As the aliens filed out in stunned silence, Zixtal remained seated, his compound eyes fixed on the frozen holographic display. Somewhere in the back of his analytical mind, a disturbing thought was beginning to form. What if everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare was wrong? What if the humans weren't just another species to be cataloged and studied? What if they were something entirely different? Something that had been preparing for war since before they reached the stars? Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. Chapter 2. The Lesson. The amphitheater buzzed with nervous energy as alien cadets took their seats. Word had spread through the academy overnight. The human instructors weren't just telling war stories. They were revealing something that was making the galaxy's greatest military minds reconsider everything they thought they knew about combat. Commander Zixtal arrived early, his 8 arms laden with data tablets containing every analysis of the Vega Colony battle his clearance level allowed. He had spent the night reviewing tactical breakdowns, casualty reports, and fleet engagement patterns. The mathematics still didn't make sense. Lieutenant Kriva settled beside him, her scales rippling with barely contained anticipation. I've been thinking about what they said yesterday, she whispered, her forked tongue flicking nervously. About fighting for each other instead of fighting for victory. What does that even mean? Before Zixtal could respond, the 3 human instructors returned to the stage. Today, Colonel Martinez moved with a slight smile that somehow made her appear more dangerous than yesterday's professional demeanor. Major Washington's prosthetic arm gleamed under the lights, and Captain O'Connor carried a worn leather bag. That looked like it had seen more battles than most warships. Good morning, Martinez said, her voice carrying the same easy confidence. I trust you all had time to think about yesterday's introduction. Any questions before we continue? A Luminary cadet's energy form flickered brighter. Colonel Martinez, our analysis of the Vega engagement suggests human losses should have been catastrophic. The Rixtar had every tactical advantage. Should have been, Washington agreed. According to every War College simulation we've run since the battle, Vega Colony should have fallen in 6 hours with 97% human casualties. But it didn't. O'Connor added, opening her leather bag and withdrawing what appeared to be an ancient projectile weapon. Crude, mechanical, clearly inferior to modern energy weapons. Want to know why? The holographic display activated, showing the interior of Vega Colony's main command center. Chaos reigned, screens displaying incoming threats, officers shouting orders, and in the center of it all, an older human man with gray hair and tired eyes. Colonel Marcus Webb, Martinez identified. 28 years of service Martian uprising veteran officially retired for 6 years before the Rikstar showed up. The hologram zoomed in on Webb's face as the first Rikstar ships began their bombardment. Instead of the fear or determination most species would expect, there was something else entirely, a weary sort of sadness. The Rikstar opened with standard orbital bombardment, Washington narrated as energy beams lanced down from space, striking the colony's outer defenses. Textbook precision, calculated to destroy defensive positions while leaving infrastructure intact for occupation. What they didn't account for, O'Connor said, hefting the ancient weapon, was that human veterans don't fight textbook wars. The scene shifted to show Vega colony's mining tunnels, a vast network carved deep into the asteroid's core. What had been industrial passages were now something else entirely. A maze of defensive positions, supply caches, and interconnected strongpoints that seemed to follow no recognizable military doctrine. "This is wrong," muttered a hive drone, its compound eyes analyzing the display. "The defensive positions violate basic tactical principles. Overlapping fields of fire are inefficient. Supply lines are redundant. The fortifications appear random." Martinez's smile widened. "To you they look random. To Colonel Webb and his veterans they looked like home." The hologram shifted perspective, showing the tunnels from ground level. Suddenly, the seemingly chaotic defensive network made terrifying sense. Every position could support every other position. Every tunnel led to 3 different escape routes. Every strong point was connected to supply caches that could support extended operations. "You see random positions," Washington explained. "We see Fallujah, Stalingrad, the tunnels of Kuchi, the caves of Iwo Jima. Every defensive position ever built by humans who had to hold ground against impossible odds." A young Arcturian cadet raised 2 of his arms. "But surely the Rikstar adapted once they realized the colony was fortified." O'Connor laughed, not the professional chuckle from yesterday, but something harder and more predatory. "Oh, they adapted. They sent down their first wave. 10,000 synthetic soldiers, perfect coordination, total tactical awareness, programmed with the combat knowledge of 100 species." The holographic display showed the Rikstar assault force descending toward Vega colony. Perfect formations of chrome-plated warriors moving with mechanical precision through the mining tunnels. Their sensors were state-of-the-art. Their weapons could punch through starship armor, and their tactical computers processed millions of combat scenarios per second. "They should have swept through those tunnels in hours," Martinez said. "Instead, they lasted 23 minutes. Zixtal's mandibles clicked in disbelief. 23 minutes? That's impossible. The Rikstar are the most efficient ground combat force in the galaxy." "Efficient, yes," Washington agreed. "But efficiency assumes your enemy plays by the same rules you do." The hologram zoomed in on a tunnel intersection where Rikstar soldiers moved in textbook formation. Perfect spacing, overlapping fields of fire, sensor coverage optimized for maximum awareness. Then, the ceiling exploded. "Meet Sergeant Maria Santos," O'Connor said as a small human woman dropped from the collapsing ceiling, landing behind the Rikstar formation. She carried the same type of primitive projectile weapon O'Connor held, but in her hands, it moved like an extension of her will. 73 years old, grandmother of 9, veteran of 4 wars. She's been fighting in tunnels since before the first Rikstar rolled off the assembly line. What followed wasn't a battle, it was an education in violence. Santos moved through the Rikstar formation like a ghost, appearing and disappearing in shadows that shouldn't have provided concealment. Her ancient weapon shouldn't have penetrated their armor, but somehow every shot found gaps, weak points, connections between plates. "This is impossible," breathed Lieutenant Kriva. "Their armor should stop those primitive projectiles." "Should, yes," Martinez agreed. "But Santos didn't shoot at their armor. She shot at their sensors, their communications arrays, their power couplings, their joints." The hologram showed Santos's path through the formation, not the straight lines of military doctrine, but something organic and flowing, like water finding cracks in stone. 47 years ago, Washington explained, Santos was a 19-year-old, Private fighting synthetic soldiers in the Outer Colony Rebellion. Different war, different enemies, same basic principle. If you can't fight through the armor, fight around it. But how did she know where their weak points were? Asked a luminary. Cadet O'Connor's expression turned grim. Because we've been fighting synthetic soldiers for 60 years. Different models, different manufacturers, same basic design principles. Energy shielding requires power distribution. Power distribution requires connections. Connections are vulnerable to kinetic impact. The holographic display pulled back to show the entire tunnel network. What had started as one old woman ambushing a patrol had become something far more complex. The Rixtar were being hit from dozens of positions simultaneously, not random attacks but coordinated strikes that followed a pattern. Webb's veterans didn't just dig defensive positions, Martinez explained. They created a three-dimensional battlefield where every human knew exactly where every other human was supposed to be at any given moment. Without communication networks, Washington added, without tactical computers, without any of the technology modern warfare depends on. Then how? Zixtal began. Hand signals, sound patterns, light sequences, the same methods human soldiers have used for thousands of years, O'Connor interrupted. Methods that don't show up on sensors, can't be jammed, and don't require power sources. The holographic display showed the Rixtar response. Additional forces, heavier weapons, advanced sensors designed to penetrate the colony's defenses. 10,000 became 20,000. 20,000 became 50,000. The Rixtar kept escalating, Martinez said, expecting each new advantage to break human resistance. Better armor, stronger weapons, more sophisticated tactics. And the humans kept adapting. Washington continued, because that's what humans do. We adapt. The scene shifted to show a new figure emerging from the tunnels. A man so old he needed a mechanical exoskeleton just to stand, carrying a weapon that looked like it belonged in a museum. Master Sergeant Robert Chen, O'Connor identified. 89 years old, 36 years of active service, fought in conflicts most people have never heard of. Chen moved through the tunnels with the slow, deliberate pace of advanced age. But there was something in his eyes that made even the Rixtar's advanced combat algorithms hesitate. Chen had fought synthetic soldiers before, Martinez explained. Different war, different century, but synthetic soldiers nonetheless. He knew something about them that their programmers had never considered. What? Zixtal found himself asking, his analytical mind racing to understand the tactical implications. O'Connor hefted her primitive weapon, her green eyes reflecting something ancient and terrible. Synthetic soldiers are programmed to fight, they're very good at it. But they're not programmed to understand what they're fighting for. The holographic display showed Chen approaching a group of Rixtar soldiers who had taken defensive positions in a mining chamber. Instead of attacking, he did something that violated every principle of modern warfare. He walked directly toward them, weapon lowered, speaking in a calm, conversational tone. "What is he doing?" whispered a hive drone. "He's talking to them," Washington said simply. "But they're synthetic. They don't respond to psychological warfare." "No," Martinez agreed. "They don't, but they do respond to logic." The hologram revealed Chen's words. "You boys are a long way from home. Your fleet's taking heavy casualties up there. Your resupply lines are being cut, your command structure is fragmenting. You want to know why?" The Rixtar soldiers remained in position, but their weapons tracked Chen uncertainly. Their tactical computers had no protocols for this situation. "Because you're fighting for conquest," Chen continued, still walking toward their position. "We're fighting for each other. And son, that makes all the difference in the world." What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists for generations. The Rixtar soldiers, faced with a tactical situation their programming couldn't process, made the logical decision to eliminate the threat. They never got the chance. The tunnel erupted as 50 human veterans opened fire simultaneously from positions the Rixtar sensors hadn't detected. Not random fire, but precisely coordinated strikes that disabled every synthetic soldier in the chamber without harming Chen, who had never stopped walking. The Rikstar lost 18,000 soldiers in the first day, Washington said as the holographic display showed casualty reports scrolling past in chrome bright text. Not to superior technology or brilliant tactics, but to something their databases had no classification for. What? Lieutenant Kriva asked, her scales rippling. With nervous energy, O'Connor's smile was sharp as a blade. Institutional knowledge. 60 years of human veterans who had fought every type of war against every type of enemy, sharing everything they'd learned with everyone around them. The holographic display shifted to show the surface of Vega Colony, where the real surprise was waiting. The Rikstar fleet, expecting to provide orbital support for a quick ground operation, found themselves facing something unprecedented. While the ground battle raged, Martinez explained, Webb's naval veterans had been busy. The scene showed ancient human ships, freighters, transports, even a few museum pieces, emerging from the asteroid field surrounding Vega Colony. They moved in no recognizable formation, followed no standard tactical doctrine, and seemed completely outmatched by the sleek Rikstar warships. "This is suicide," breathed Zixtal. "Those ships are centuries out of date." "Yes, they are," Washington agreed. "Commanded by men and women who learned space combat when ships were held together with welds and prayers. What followed, redefined, naval warfare for every species watching. The human ships didn't try to match the Rikstar's advanced technology. Instead, they did something no military computer could predict. They fought dirty. Ancient mining charges became improvised torpedoes. Cargo containers became kinetic weapons. Civilian ships rammed military vessels in maneuvers that violated every principle of space combat. But the casualties, protested a luminary cadet. The human losses must have been enormous. They were, O'Connor admitted quietly. We lost good people, veterans who had survived decades of warfare, dying in ships that should have been scrapped before their grandchildren were born. So why did they do it? Zixtal asked. The three human instructors exchanged that look again, the wordless communication of shared understanding. Because, Martinez said finally, when you're fighting for something worth dying for, the mathematics change. The holographic display showed the final phase of the battle. The Rikstar fleet, designed for efficient conquest, found themselves caught in a three-dimensional nightmare where human ships appeared from impossible angles, struck with weapons that shouldn't have worked, and disappeared into asteroid fields that sensors couldn't penetrate. The Rikstar withdrew after 6 days, Washington said. First tactical retreat in their species recorded history. They lost 60% of their fleet, O'Connor added. Against opponents they should have swept aside without effort. But how? Zixtal demanded, his analytical mind struggling to process what he had witnessed. The technology gap was insurmountable. The numerical advantage was overwhelming. By every military metric, the humans should have been annihilated. Colonel Martinez stepped forward, her weathered face serious. Commander, you're asking the wrong question. What should I be asking? Not how we won, she replied, but why we couldn't lose. The holographic display faded, leaving the amphitheater in normal lighting. The alien cadets sat in stunned silence, their various forms of eyes fixed on the three humans who had just redefined their understanding of warfare. Tomorrow, Martinez announced, we'll talk about what happened after Vega Colony, when the galaxy realized that humans don't fight wars the way everyone else does. When they realized, Washington added, that we've been preparing for this our entire history. And when they discovered, O'Connor concluded, that every human conflict, every war, every battle, every skirmish, was just practice for the day, we'd have to fight for our survival among the stars. As the cadets filed out in thoughtful silence, Zixtal remained seated, staring at the empty stage. A new understanding was beginning to form, one that terrified him more than any enemy fleet. The humans hadn't gotten lucky at Vega Colony. They had been preparing for it their entire existence as a species. And if that was true, what else were they preparing for? Chapter 3. The Truth. The atmosphere in the War College amphitheater had changed. Where once alien cadets had sat with the casual confidence of superior beings studying primitive creatures, now there was an undercurrent of nervous energy, Conversations were quieter, glances more thoughtful, and more than one species representative had been seen reviewing their homeworld's defensive capabilities. Commander Zixtal arrived to find the amphitheater already half full, despite being an hour early. Word had spread beyond the academy. Senior military officials from a dozen species sat in the upper galleries, their attention focused on the empty stage below. "They're scared," Lieutenant Kriva observed, settling her reptilian frame into the seat beside him. "Look at them. The Luminari delegation hasn't stopped flickering since yesterday. The hive drones are clustering in defensive patterns. Even the Arcturian command staff looked nervous." Zixtal's compound eyes tracked across the gathering crowd. She was right. These weren't just students anymore. They were representatives of the galaxy's greatest military powers, and they were beginning to realize they might not understand warfare as well as they thought. "What do you think they'll show us today?" Kriva asked. Before Zixtal could answer, the lights dimmed and the three human instructors took the stage. Today, something was different about them. Colonel Martinez moved with the purposeful stride of someone delivering a final verdict. Major Washington's prosthetic arm gleamed like polished steel, and Captain O'Connor carried herself with the quiet intensity of a predator preparing to strike. "Good morning," Martinez said, her voice carrying to every corner of the amphitheater. "I see we have some distinguished guests today. Welcome, admirals, generals, fleet commanders. I hope you're ready for what you're about to learn." The holographic display activated, showing a star map of the local galactic sector. Dozens of species territories were marked in different colors: the sprawling Arcturian Empire, the geometric precision of hive space, the ethereal boundaries of luminary territory. "Before we continue with Vega Colony's aftermath," Washington said, "we need to discuss something that our intelligence services discovered during the battle." The star map zoomed in on Earth, showing the small blue world that had somehow produced warriors capable of defeating the galaxy's most efficient military force. "The Rikstar aren't stupid," O'Connor began, her green eyes scanning the audience. "After their defeat, they did what any rational military force would do. They studied their enemy. What they found," Martinez continued, "changed their entire understanding of human civilization." The holographic display shifted, showing historical footage from Earth. Ancient armies clashing with bronze weapons, medieval knights charging across muddy fields, soldiers fighting in trenches that stretched across continents. "Humans have been at war," Washington said quietly, "for our entire recorded history." A soft murmur ran through the audience. In the upper galleries, Zixtal could see admirals and generals leaning forward, their attention completely focused. "Most species develop spaceflight, then learn warfare," O'Connor explained. "You master your home system, encounter other species, and conflict eventually develops." "Humans are different," Martinez said. "We mastered warfare, then learned spaceflight." The historical footage continued. World War I's mechanized slaughter, World War II's industrial genocide, the Cold War's nuclear standoff, the Martian uprising's zero-gravity combat. "By the time we reached the stars," Washington continued, "we had fought wars with every weapon imaginable: chemical weapons, biological weapons, nuclear weapons, cyber warfare, psychological operations, economic warfare. We had fought in every environment: underwater, underground, in space, in dimensions most species can't perceive. Every human conflict taught us something," O'Connor added. "Every war, every battle, every skirmish added to our collective knowledge of how to kill efficiently and survive longer." The display showed statistics that made the alien audience shift uncomfortably. Human casualties from their own wars numbered in the hundreds of millions, spread across centuries of continuous conflict. "This is why Vega Colony didn't surprise us," Martinez said. 15,000 veterans showing up to fight impossible odds. That's just Tuesday for humanity." A Luminary Admiral's energy form flickered brighter. "Colonel Martinez, surely you're exaggerating. No species fights continuously for thousands of years." The three humans exchanged that familiar look. The wordless communication that spoke of shared understanding. "Admiral," Washington replied, "show me a 20-year period in human history without a war somewhere on our planet." The challenge hung in the air. In the upper galleries, alien military leaders consulted their databases, their tactical computers, their historical archives. They found nothing. "That's impossible," whispered a hive queen, her multiple voices creating an eerie harmony. "Continuous. Warfare would destroy a civilization." "It should," O'Connor agreed. "Instead, it forged us." The holographic display shifted to show modern Earth. Gleaming cities, orbital platforms, the massive shipyards where humanity's expanding fleet was constructed. "Every technology we developed," Martinez explained, "was tested in combat first. Our computers were designed to track missile trajectories. Our medical advances came from treating battlefield injuries. Our engineering principles were proven under fire. Even our social structures," Washington added, "were shaped by the need to organize for warfare. Our governments, our economies, our educational systems, all designed to function during conflict." "Which brings us," O'Connor said, her voice dropping to a tone that made survival instincts throughout the amphitheater trigger warning signals, "to what happened after Vega Colony." The star map returned, but now it was different. Human territories were marked in blue and they were expanding. The Galactic Council's first response, Martinez began, was to classify the Vega engagement as an anomaly, one lucky victory by a primitive species. Their second response, Washington continued, was to commission a study of human military capabilities. Their third response, O'Connor finished, was panic. The holographic display showed classified documents, intelligence reports, military assessments, diplomatic communications, all bearing the same conclusion. Humanity represented an existential threat to galactic stability. The study revealed something that terrified every military analyst who read it, Martinez said. "Humans don't just fight wars. We prepare for wars that haven't happened yet." New images appeared. Human military academies where children learned tactics alongside mathematics. Civilian populations trained in emergency procedures that assumed hostile invasion. Industrial complexes designed to be converted to weapons production within hours. "Every human learns basic combat skills," Washington explained. "Not because we expect them to fight, but because we've learned that preparation prevents desperation. Our entertainment focuses on conflict resolution," O'Connor added. "Our sports simulate combat. Our games teach strategy. Our literature explores the psychology of warfare." "From the moment a human child can walk," Martinez said, "they're being prepared for a war they may never fight." The implications hit the alien audience like a physical blow. In the upper galleries, military leaders were making frantic communications with their homeworlds. "But surely," Commander Zixtal found himself saying, "this is just cultural paranoia, primitive instincts that will fade as humanity matures." The three humans looked at him with expressions that mixed pity with predatory amusement. "Commander," Martinez replied, 3 days after the Vega Colony battle, human industrial output increased by 40%. Military recruitment doubled," Washington added, "and our research into defensive technologies accelerated to levels that made our own scientists nervous," O'Connor concluded. The holographic display showed new images. Human shipyards working around the clock, training facilities expanding exponentially, research installations that seemed to appear overnight. "The galaxy thought Vega Colony was the end of the story," Martinez said. "For humanity, it was the opening chapter." "You see," Washington explained, "the thing about humans is that we learn from everything. Every victory teaches us what works. Every defeat teaches us what doesn't. And every threat," O'Connor added, her green eyes reflecting something ancient and implacable, "teaches us what we need to prepare for next." The star map showed human expansion accelerating. New colonies, new trade routes, new defensive positions, spreading throughout local space. "This is why you're all here," Martinez announced, addressing the entire amphitheater. "Not to learn about Vega Colony, but to understand what it means." "Means for what?" asked a draconian general, his scaled features tense with concern. "Means for you," Washington replied simply. The holographic display shifted one final time, showing a projection of galactic politics 50 years in the future. Human territory had expanded dramatically, But more concerning were the alliance patterns, species after species aligning themselves with human interests. "The thing about humans," O'Connor said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence, "is that we don't conquer. We integrate." The projection showed trade agreements, defense pacts, technological exchanges, all flowing toward human space like rivers converging on an ocean. "We don't need to invade your worlds," Martinez explained. "We just need to be indispensable to your survival." "Human medical technology extends lifespans by centuries," Washington listed. "Human engineering makes your cities safer. Human agricultural techniques feed your populations more efficiently. And human military doctrine," O'Connor concluded, "makes your enemies think twice about attacking you." A hive queen's multiple voices created an urgent harmonic discord. "You're describing economic conquest through military deterrence." "We're describing partnership," Martinez corrected. "The same way humanity has always expanded, not through domination, but through integration." The holographic display showed historical Earth examples, trade routes protected by military presence, technological advances shared in exchange for resources, defensive alliances that became economic partnerships. "But there's something else," Washington said, his prosthetic hand whirring as he gestured toward the star map. "Something the post-Vega intelligence reports discovered that changed everything." The display zoomed in on Earth's solar system, showing not just the homeworld but the vast network of orbital platforms, asteroid mining operations, and defensive installations that surrounded it. "Humans didn't just prepare for one war," O'Connor explained. "We prepared for every war." New images appeared, weapons designed to fight energy-based entities, tactics developed for combating hive minds, strategies for confronting species that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "We studied every species in the galaxy," Martinez said, "not for conquest, but for defense. We asked ourselves, if we had to fight the Luminari, how would we do it? If the hive attacked, what would work? If the Arcturians turned hostile, what would we need? And we prepared accordingly," Washington added. The implications were staggering. The humans hadn't just defeated the Rixtar through luck or superior tactics. They had been specifically preparing for that exact type of enemy for decades. "This is why," O'Connor said, "your intelligence services are recommending against military action against humanity. This is why," Martinez continued, "your economic advisors are suggesting increased cooperation. And this is why," Washington concluded, "your political leaders are privately discussing defensive alliances." In the upper galleries, Zixtal could see the effect of these revelations on the assembled military leadership. Whispered conversations, urgent communications with homeworlds, the dawning realization that they were facing something unprecedented in galactic history. "Questions?" Martinez asked, though her tone suggested she already knew what they would be. Admiral Vextar of the Luminari delegation flickered to brilliant intensity. "Colonel Martinez, are you saying that humanity has been preparing for galactic warfare since before first contact?" "I'm saying," Martinez replied, "that humanity has been preparing for survival since we developed language. The galaxy just happens to be where we ended up." "But what do you want?" demanded General Korth of the Draconian fleet. "What is humanity's ultimate objective?" The three humans looked at each other, and for the first time since the lectures began, they seemed genuinely surprised by the question. "We want to survive," O'Connor said simply. "We want our children to be safe. We want to explore the universe and find our place in it. We want," Washington added, "what every species wants, a future worth fighting for." "The difference," Martinez concluded, "is that we're prepared to fight for it." The holographic display showed one final image, a human child learning to read, the book in her hands a collection of fairy tales about heroes facing impossible odds and winning through courage, sacrifice, and determination. "Every human child," Martinez said softly, "grows up hearing stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when everything they love is threatened. Every human adult," Washington continued, "knows that sometimes the only choice is between fighting and losing everything. And every human veteran," O'Connor finished, understands that the best way to avoid a war is to be so prepared for it that your enemies choose peace instead. The silence that followed was profound. In that moment, every alien in the amphitheater understood that they were not dealing with another species to be catalogued and studied. They were dealing with humanity. "Class dismissed," Martinez announced. "Tomorrow we'll discuss the future, both the one we're building together and the one we're all preparing for." As the audience filed out in contemplative silence, Zixtal remained seated, his analytical mind processing what he had learned. Beside him, Lieutenant Kriva was equally motionless, her scales reflecting deep thought. "They're not conquerors," she said finally. "No," Zixtal agreed. "They're survivors. And they've been preparing for survival on a galactic scale since before they knew the galaxy existed. So what happens now?" Zixtal looked at the empty stage where 3 humans had just redefined galactic politics with a history lesson. "Now," he said, "we decide whether we want to learn from them or test ourselves against them. And if we choose to test ourselves?" Zixtal's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or fear. "Then we'll discover exactly how well we understand combat compared to Earth's veterans." In the upper galleries, similar conversations were taking place in dozens of languages. The galaxy's military leaders were faced with a choice that would define the next century of interstellar relations: partnership with humanity, or preparation for a war against opponents who had been preparing for war their entire existence as a species. The smart money was on partnership. But as any human veteran could tell you, it's not the smart wars you have to worry about. It's the stupid ones. Chapter 4. The Choice. The final day of lectures drew representatives from across the galaxy. The amphitheater, designed to hold a few thousand cadets, now overflowed with delegates, observers, and military leaders whose decisions would shape interstellar politics for generations. Commander Zixtal found himself seated between Fleet Admiral Corex of the Arcturian Empire and High Commander Thessia of the Luminary Collective, beings whose combined fleets could level star systems, now listening intently to 3 humans who looked like they should be in retirement homes rather than reshaping galactic warfare doctrine. "Final day," Lieutenant Kriva observed, her scales rippling with nervous energy. "Think they'll tell us how this ends?" "I think," Zixtal replied, watching Colonel Martinez take the stage with the same casual confidence she'd shown every day. "They're going to tell us how it begins." The holographic display activated, but instead of historical footage or tactical analysis, it showed something that made every alien in the amphitheater lean forward. Real-time intelligence feeds from across the galaxy. Ladies, gentlemen, and varied biological classifications, Martinez began, her voice carrying to every corner of the packed venue. "Today we discuss the present." Major Washington stepped forward, his prosthetic arm catching the light. 3 weeks ago, when these lectures began, your respective governments were debating humanity's place in galactic politics. Today, Captain O'Connor added, her green eyes scanning the crowd of military leaders. "Those debates are over." The holographic display showed a cascade of official documents, treaty proposals, trade agreements, defense pacts, and more concerning items, military buildup authorizations, fleet redeployment orders, and classified research initiatives. The Arcturian Empire has quietly moved 30% of its fleet to defensive positions along the human border, Martinez announced. Not aggressive positions, mind you, defensive ones. Fleet Admiral Corex's crystalline features shifted in what might have been embarrassment. A reasonable precaution given recent intelligence assessments. The Luminary Collective, Washington continued, has initiated research into kinetic weapons for the first time in 8 centuries. High Commander Thessia's energy form flickered rapidly. "Our defensive capabilities require updating." "The Hive has begun producing individual weapons for drone units," O'Connor added, "something they haven't done since achieving collective consciousness." "And the Draconians," Martinez concluded, "have started teaching unconventional warfare to their officer corps." General Korth's scaled features remained impassive, but his silence spoke volumes. "In 3 weeks," Washington observed, "humanity has accidentally triggered the largest military reorganization in galactic history. Without firing a shot, O'Connor added. Without making a threat, without even asking for anything. The holographic display shifted to show trade statistics that painted an equally revealing picture. Human exports had increased by 300%, with the majority going to defensive technologies, medical equipment, and educational materials. But that's not the interesting part, Martinez said, her smile carrying a predatory edge. The interesting part is what you're all buying. The statistics broke down by category. 90% of human military technology exports were defensive systems, 80% of medical exports were trauma treatment equipment, and 70% of educational materials were focused on survival training. You're not buying weapons to attack us, Washington explained. You're buying weapons to fight like us. You're not buying medical technology to help your populations, O'Connor continued. You're buying medical technology to keep soldiers alive in extended conflicts. And you're not buying educational materials to enlighten your citizens, Martinez concluded. You're buying educational materials to prepare them for war. A murmur ran through the amphitheater as the implications sank in. The galaxy's great powers weren't preparing to fight humanity. They were preparing to become humanity. This brings us, Martinez said, to the real lesson we came here to teach. The holographic display changed, showing a simple image. Earth as seen from space, a small blue marble floating in the cosmic dark. Humans didn't become warriors because we're naturally violent, Washington explained. We became warriors because our planet tried to kill us for millions of years. Images flashed past, ice ages that wiped out most life, volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun, asteroid impacts that reshaped continents, plagues that devastated populations. Every human alive today, O'Connor said, is descended from survivors of catastrophes that would have wiped out most species. We didn't choose to be good at warfare, Martinez added. We were forced to become good at survival, and warfare is just survival writ large. The display showed historical footage of human responses to disasters, cities rebuilding after devastation, populations adapting to climate change, entire civilizations reorganizing in the face of existential threats. But here's what the intelligence reports missed, Washington said, his voice dropping to a tone that commanded absolute attention. Humans aren't unique in this galaxy. New images appeared, the ice-locked world of Arcteria, where the Empire's ancestors had fought for resources in eternal winter. The energy storms of luminary space where consciousness itself was constantly threatened by cosmic radiation. The hive worlds where individual identity was consumed by collective survival needs. Every species in this room, O'Connor observed, survived their own version of hell to reach the stars. Every species here, Martinez continued, has the capacity for the same kind of warfare humanity displayed at Vega Colony. The difference, Washington concluded, is that humans never stopped preparing for the next catastrophe. The holographic display showed comparative analyses, Arcturian engineering that could withstand planet-killing impacts, luminary energy, manipulation that could power civilizations through cosmic disasters, hive organizational capabilities that could coordinate the actions of trillions of individuals. You all have the tools, Martinez said. You all have the history. You all have the capability. What you lack, O'Connor added, is the institutional paranoia that keeps humans preparing for wars that haven't happened yet. Which brings us, Washington said, to the choice you all have to make. The holographic display showed two projections of the galaxy 50 years in the future. In the first, species territories remained largely static, with occasional conflicts resolved through traditional diplomatic and military channels. In the second, the galaxy resembled something entirely different. A network of interconnected alliances, shared technologies, and coordinated defense systems that could respond to threats no single species could face alone. The universe is a dangerous place, Martinez said simply. Earth taught us that lesson early and often. But the universe is also full of species that learned the same lesson on their own worlds, Washington added. The question, O'Connor concluded, is whether we learn from each other or repeat the same mistakes on a galactic scale. Fleet Admiral Corex rose from his seat, his crystalline form catching and reflecting the amphitheater's lights. "Colonel Martinez, are you proposing a formal military alliance?" "I'm proposing," Martinez replied, "that we stop pretending we're not all preparing for the same thing." "Which is?" High Commander Thessia asked, her energy form fluctuating with curiosity. The three humans exchanged their familiar look of shared understanding before O'Connor answered. "The day something shows up from outside the galaxy," she said quietly, "and we discover that all our local conflicts were just practice for the war that really matters." The silence that followed was profound. In that moment, every military leader in the amphitheater understood that they were not just representatives of competing species. They were potential allies against threats they hadn't yet imagined. "Ladies and gentlemen," Martinez announced, "class is dismissed. Your real education begins now." As the massive crowd began to file out, conversations erupted in dozens of languages. Trade proposals, defense agreements, technological exchanges, and research partnerships were being negotiated in the aisles. Commander Zixtal remained seated, his analytical mind processing the week's revelations. Beside him, Lieutenant Kriva was equally thoughtful. "They did it," she said finally. "They turned a series of military lectures into a diplomatic revolution." "Did they?" Zixtal asked. "Or did they just help us realize what we were already becoming?" Before Kriva could answer, Colonel Martinez approached their section. Up close, she looked even more like what she was, a grandmother who had seen too much war and wanted to prevent her grandchildren from seeing more. "Commander Zixtal," she said. "Lieutenant Kriva, could I have a word?" They followed her to a quiet corner of the amphitheater, where Major Washington and Captain O'Connor were waiting. "We have a proposition," Washington said without preamble. "The Galactic War College is expanding," O'Connor explained. "New campuses, new curriculums, new approaches to teaching warfare. We'd like you to help design them," Martinez added. "Both of you. Your analytical skills and her tactical instincts could help create something unprecedented. A war college that teaches all of our species' approaches to conflict," Washington continued. "Not just human doctrine, but Arcturian engineering, draconian honor codes, luminary energy tactics, hive coordination protocols. A place where the galaxy's future military leaders learn that their greatest enemies aren't each other," O'Connor concluded, "but the challenges they haven't yet discovered." Zixtal's compound eyes focused on the three humans who had just offered him the chance to help reshape galactic military education. "And you trust us with this?" Martinez smiled, the same expression that had captivated and terrified the galaxy's greatest military minds for the past week. "Commander," she said, "trust is just another word for shared survival interests. And right now," Washington added, "we all have the same survival interests. Even if we don't know what they are yet," O'Connor finished. As the last delegates filed out of the amphitheater, Zixtal looked around at the empty seats where representatives of a dozen species had learned that warfare was not about conquest or dominance, but about survival and preparation. "Yes," he said finally. "We'll help." "Good," Martinez replied, "because the real lessons are just beginning." Epilogue. The Garden. 2 years later. The new Galactic War College campus orbited, a neutron star whose gravitational anomalies made it perfect for testing unconventional tactics. Built through combined Arcturian engineering, luminary energy systems, and human stubbornness, it housed the most comprehensive military education facility the galaxy had ever seen. Colonel Sarah Martinez, now Director of Historical Combat Studies, walked through the memorial garden where holographic displays honored veterans from every species. At the center stood a simple plaque with words that had become the college's unofficial motto: "Nobody fights alone." "Admiring your handiwork?" Commander Zixtal asked, approaching with the easy familiarity of someone who had spent 2 years turning theoretical warfare into practical education. His title now read Dean of Analytical Combat Studies, and his 8 arms were laden with reports from their most recent joint training exercises. "Just thinking," Martinez replied, Watching a group of mixed-species cadets practice coordinated tactics that incorporated human flexibility, Arcturian precision, draconian honor codes, and hive unity. We set out to teach them about warfare, and they're teaching us about cooperation. Lieutenant, now Colonel, Kriva emerged from a nearby building, her scales reflecting satisfaction. As Dean of Applied Tactics, she had overseen the development of training scenarios that pushed every species beyond their traditional approaches to conflict. The latest class graduated today, she reported. Deployment assignments are interesting. Mixed species crews on every major fleet, joint command, structures, integrated supply chains. Any problems? Zixtal asked. None beyond the usual interspecies communication issues, Kriva replied, though the humans still insist on calling everything by Earth military terminology. That's because, said a familiar voice, human military terminology assumes everything is trying to kill you, which is generally accurate. They turned to see Major, now General, James Washington approaching, his prosthetic arm now gleaming with improvements contributed by a dozen different species technologies. As Dean of Survival Studies, he had created training programs that prepared soldiers for conflicts in environments ranging from quantum foam to crystalline matrices. Any word from the Outer Rim surveys? Martinez asked. Washington's expression grew serious. Admiral Chen's expedition found something. Long-range sensors detected structures that don't match any known architecture, energy signatures that suggest technologies we can't classify. Hostile? Zixtal asked, his analytical mind immediately shifting to threat assessment. Unknown, Washington replied. But big. Really big. Captain Riley O'Connor joined the group, her red hair now streaked with silver from 2 years of preparing the galaxy for conflicts they hoped would never come. As Dean of Strategic Integration, she had overseen the development of defensive systems that combined every species' technological advantages. The joint fleet exercises went well, she reported. Response times are down 60%. Coordination efficiency is up by comparable margins. If something does come calling, we'll be ready. Ready for what, though? Kriva asked. We're preparing for hypothetical threats based on theoretical capabilities. That's what humans do, Martinez said with a slight smile. We prepare for wars that might never happen with enemies we haven't met using tactics we hope we'll never need. And it works, Washington added. Most of the time. Most of the time? Zixtal's mandibles clicked nervously. O'Connor's green eyes held that familiar predatory gleam. The times it doesn't work are when the enemy is better prepared than we are. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the mixed species cadets practice maneuvers that would have been impossible just a few years earlier. Humans learning Arcturian precision, Draconians adopting human flexibility, Luminary working with hive coordination protocols. You know what the strangest part is? Kriva observed. We came here thinking humans were uniquely good at warfare. Instead, we learned, Zixtal continued, that every species is uniquely good at warfare. Humans are just uniquely good at admitting it. And preparing for it, Washington added. And teaching it, O'Connor concluded. And, Martinez said, looking out at the garden where monuments to fallen warriors from every species stood together, under alien stars, learning that the best way to honor the dead is to make sure their sacrifices prepare the living for whatever comes next. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority communication. Washington activated his comm unit, listened for a moment, then looked up with an expression that mixed excitement with concern. Admiral Chen's expedition, he announced. They've made contact. Hostile contact? Zixtal asked. Unknown, Washington replied. But they're requesting immediate reinforcement by joint species fleets using integrated command protocols. The group exchanged glances, the wordless communication that had become their own shared understanding. Well, Martinez said, looks like graduation exercises are over. Time for the final exam? Kriva asked. Time, O'Connor replied, her voice carrying the same tone that had captivated and terrified audiences 2 years earlier, to find out if we've been preparing for the right war. As they walked toward the command center where representatives from every major species were already assembling, Martinez paused at the Memorial Garden's central plaque. "Nobody fights alone," she read aloud. "Good thing," Washington observed, "because I have a feeling we're about to test that principle on a galactic scale." "Question is," Zixtal said, his analytical mind already processing fleet deployment scenarios, "are we prepared enough?" O'Connor's smile was sharp as a blade and twice as dangerous. "We're about to find out, and if we're not, then we'll do what humans always do," Martinez finished. "We'll improvise, adapt, and overcome." "Together," Kriva added. "Together," they all agreed. In the distance, warning lights began flashing as the galaxy's greatest military minds prepared to face whatever had emerged from the cosmic dark. They had spent 2 years learning that warfare was not about conquest or dominance, but about survival and preparation. Now they would discover if their education had been sufficient. The Memorial Garden's holographic displays flickered as power was redirected to combat systems, but the central plaque remained illuminated, a reminder that no matter what they faced, they would face it together. Veterans from Earth, Arcteria, Draconia, Luminary Space, and the Hive worlds had taught them that survival was not an individual achievement, but a collective responsibility. They were about to test that lesson against opponents they had been preparing for their entire existence as a spacefaring civilization. The war for galactic survival was about to begin, and this time, nobody would fight alone. End of story.